you can have the best business model out there. You can create the best products that the market has ever seen. But if you can't message well, you're not going to be able to lead your team, and the market will suffer because they will never get to enjoy your wonderful products. Now, I want you to stick around to hear the common pitfalls of messaging and what you can do to avoid them.
Leaders are not born in a womb. They are forged through heat, pressure, and a whole lot of sweat. The Fire Forged Leader podcast serves the audience through exploring leadership at work, in the community, and with the family, using a practical perspective and real-life experiences from the host, Steve Baumgartner, and his guests in the Forge. Now, it's time to enter the Forge with the Fire Forged Leader.
I've been in corporate leadership space for a great deal of my career. And to be shamefully honest, there isn't a ton of training on how to message things to your team. I've talked to other leaders in industry, in different companies, and they share the same sentiments. It's definitely a large gap for many large corporations. So my guess is that it affects the small organizations and small business owners like you in the same way. Now, before we get started, I want you to hit that pause button. I want you to grab a notepad, and I want you to grab a pen so that you can jot down some notes, because this is one of the most important yet least trained on skill sets that we need as leaders to lead our teams effectively. Today, I'm speaking directly to you, business owners, executives, and leaders throughout all of industry. But first, I want to start off with a story. Now, this is going back a few years, and I worked for this man who was actually this great guy, and it amazes me because everyone else that worked underneath of him thought that he was just this crotchety old bastard. I knew him in a different way because I spent a lot of time with him. And behind closed doors, he was pleasant to be around. He had great stories, a great sense of humor, and actually was quite personable. In front of the troops, though, he was thought to be a lot less than what he was. When he would get in front of his team, his messaging was terrible. When he tried to inspire the troops for the next big initiative, he would actually get the opposite results in what he was looking for. They would walk away feeling beat up. They were anything but inspired. They didn't even know a lot of times what the message was, let alone what they might be able to do. And I would have to do crowd control on the back end. I would have to lift people back up. I would have to clarify the message so that people would understand it. I would have to engage them. I would engage them and bring them in to be part of the solution rather than feeling like they were the problem. But this really raised my antenna around messaging and how vitally important it really is in leadership. Since then, I've observed many, many different leaders and their styles of leadership. And today, what I want to share with you is some of the pitfalls that I've seen, but even more importantly, the things you should do to improve your messaging. You guys have probably noticed this, but I'm a huge observer of people. So much sometimes that when something comes out of another leader's mouth, I do one of a couple things. I'll either do nothing because it was a standard run-of-the-mill type message. I've heard it 1,000 times before, blah, 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 a quote Jocko or whatever, right? Or I'm like, damn, that was powerful. And I pull up my phone and I take some quick notes in my notepad. Or the third thing, which we're going to talk about today, is I freaking cringe because I already know what the outcome's going to look like. I've seen it before, and I'm seeing it play out again, so I cringe. So let me tell you some of those things that make me cringe when it comes to messaging. And these are really the pitfalls, in my opinion, that you should avoid in your messaging style at all costs. Not owning the message. Not being honest with your team or withholding information. Having a lack of clarity within your message. And then no call to action whatsoever. So let me go through that list again. Not owning your message, not being honest with your team or withholding information from them, lack of clarity in your message, and finally, no call to action. Now let's break those down a little bit. All right, the first one is not owning the message. And we've all heard this play out before, right? Well, I was talking with my boss today, and my boss said that we gotta, and fill in the blank. Or, we have to do this because it's a new standard across the company. Or, here's another thing that we have to do because corporate said so. Guys, people see you as weak when you do this. And quite frankly, you should feel weak. This is a horrible position to be in. When we do this, we relinquish every bit of our leadership power to someone else. In essence, what we're doing is we're removing our leadership hat and we change it out for the hat of a paper boy, because all we're doing right now is delivering the news. The next one was not being honest with your team or withholding information from your team. Now, let me tell you, people are not as stupid as others think that they are. They can read you. They know when you're honest, and they know when you're not. Trust is the last thing you want to lose as a leader. People call me out all the time when I'm stressed out, and I haven't told them because they can read me. And if I tell them when they ask me a question, hey, what's going on, Steve? You don't seem like you today. And I tell them, oh, nothing's wrong, They lose trust in me. Now, sometimes it might just be that I'm pretty intense when I work, and, I need to tell them that. Hey, I just got this on my mind, I need to stay focused on it, what have you. But it's the truth. If we lie to them or if we withhold and we say things like, oh, there's nothing wrong, everything's good, man, they lose trust because they can read it. And if you're in a bad situation, you don't have to get all emotional in front of your team. But by God, share that with them. Don't tell them that we're winning when we're really not winning. If we're in a bad spot, tell them that we're in a bad spot. The third thing is lack of clarity with your message. Now, there are a ton of leaders out there who just ramble on. They blah, 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 blah. And they keep on going and going and going. They drone on about the granular details, and people are in their seats just drooling, wondering what the hell they're listening to. Or they go on and on and on about stories that they can't even relate to the message. When the team leaves, they look at each other and they go, what the hell was Steve talking about there? I don't know. I don't even know what the hell that meeting was about anymore. And then the fourth thing is that there's no call to action. Sometimes leaders have a great message, They have this inspiring message, everything else about their own personal story or whatever. But then they lack the call to action. And without this, your team simply sees it as a State of the Union address. They see it as informational. They don't know what to do with the information except for file it away. Have you ever been to an event and heard just a phenomenal speaker? It might have been in church where the pastor or the priest fires you up and you go home and you take immediate action on what they were saying. It might be someone during the intermission of a concert who's speaking and it's being put on for a charity. And you don't even wait for them to finish speaking so that you can be the first in line in the vestibule to give your hard-earned money to whatever organization that's sitting out there in that vestibule. Or it might be at work where you are ready to go out and bust through walls like the Kool-Aid man because you're so inspired by the words that came out of that leader's mouth. All of these things have one common thread, and it's the message, people. It's no larger or smaller than that. Let's explore some of those ways that you can avoid the previous pitfalls and improve your leadership through rock-solid messaging. I don't want you to despair, though, because right now, I'm going to tell you how to craft that perfect message. And it's the same 4 parts, people. Own your message, be transparent with your team, be clear and concise, and drive a call to action. Now, I told you to take notes before. I'm going to repeat it right now. So those 4 are: own your message, be transparent with your team, be clear and concise, and drive a call to action. So that first one, going a little bit deeper. That first one is owning your message, right? But let's say that you have a corporate entity who is handing that message down to you. What I want you to do as a leader is understand the why. Why is this message coming down to me? If that directive is handed down to you, understand that why. Understand how it aligns with the overall company vision. And then your next step of that is translating it into what it means to you personally, what it means to your organization, and to your overall team members. Why does this benefit us to do this new directive? So that when you message it, you can use words like, hey, we are working on this plan. I am asking you to do this. And when you ask, people know and trust you. When the CEO asks, quite frankly, people don't even know who that person is most of the time unless it's a small company. Number 2 is be transparent with your team. Now, this one's a delicate balance, but it's a balance. It's a dance that we need to dance. Now, for example, I had a tough conversation recently with my frontline supervision, and we talked about the cost of goods sold and how our performance level affects the cost of goods sold at a macro level. I didn't go down into the granular details. I kept it at a macro level. But then I went deeper to discuss the outcomes if we continue down that road, which could be loss of product to our plant, to competitors inside the company, so on and so forth. But I'm going to re-stress that we must be careful in this balance, because if this comes out too harshly, people can also give up on us. They can feel like there's no hope. But we must be transparent with them. But we got to do it in a way that they keep trusting us as the leader, but they have enough hope that they can be the ones that overcome the obstacle that sits in front of them. Number 3 is being clear and concise. The best way to do this, people, is write down what you're going to talk about. Okay? It seems simple, but write it down. Plot out the course of action for the message, right? What do you want them to know? What do you want them to do? So on and so forth. You don't have to be robotic in this, however. But you need to have a logical path that your people can follow. Something that a lot of people have a hard time doing is you got to trim out all the fluff. I know you want to tell stories from the time that you were 4 years old till you were 40, right? But people don't need to hear all that. They need to hear the relevant information. So get to the damn point and stop rambling. And if you tell a story, simply make sure that it's relevant to the situation. I've actually used this approach in the outline for this podcast. Number 4 is drive a call to action. Out of the 4, I feel like this one is probably the most important thing as a leader. And the reason why is that it brings our team into the solution. If they're not brought into being part of the solution, then a lot of people assume that they're part of the problem. So what does this look like? It looks like asking them to do something when they leave the room. What are they going to do? By when do you need it? And all of those kind of things that make up actions. For example, that message about the cost of goods sold that I talked to you about earlier, I asked that group of people to do a root cause analysis throughout that day and then propose actions to me at the end of the day of what those next steps in that problem-solving event were going to look like. To wrap this all up, you're going to be amazed with how much a good message can drive your leadership success. So let's avoid those pitfalls of improper messaging by owning our message, being transparent, ensuring that we're clear and concise with our message, and giving our team a good call to action, making them part of the solution rather than being part of the problem. So my call to action for you today is review the last message that you gave to your team. And I want you to rate yourself against those 4 points. See where you need to improve, and then go out there and incorporate that improvement into your next message. So once again, thank you for joining me again on another episode of the Fireforge Leader Podcast. And if you found this discussion valuable, I want you to share it with your entire network and leave me a review and a rating. Until next time, keep forging your path with purpose and passion.
You have just experienced the heat and pressure of the forge. Remember, words without action are meaningless. Now, after the heat of the forge, shape your thoughts, quench your brain, then put your new tools to use, adding to your leadership. Tune in next week for more lessons from the forge.